The next technique I want to talk to you about is similar to that first one, which was solid wash, and we did a little bit of feathering it. We're going to do a graded wash, which is just taking a wash from its solid point to either lightening it up or taking a lighter wash and adding more pigment in. So we're going to do a graded wash, but to do this I have to take this out of the frame so I can use some of the things. With a graded wash, it's very nice if you can get some sort of a tilt on your surface. Right now my table is very flat. But I have the help of my handy dandy Mr. Sketch marker box over here that I'm going to set on the bottom of my paper. So I'm going to lift this up just a little bit and I'm going to prop it so that this box over here is underneath here. So the part that's at the bottom of your screen is raised just a little bit higher. So now I can't set my palette on there anymore. But what we're going to do is I'm going to take this little like cave area that I have, and I mixed up this mix of green. You do whatever color you want. I chose Viridian green and Sat green just to get a little bit of a mix. And because I'm starting in an area where it's not so big over here versus this over here, oops, I'm going to start with a smaller brush and then I'll work my way into a bigger brush. But what I'm going to do is get my main pigment on the bottom here, and because I want it to be darker on the bottom and blend to light, because if this is our aquarium, we would have lighter areas up top here and more pigment down here. So I'm going to start with my pigment, have that all mixed up, and this is dry paper because we're doing a graded wash. I'm kind of getting the edges here. I want to work quickly enough so that it doesn't dry, and I also want it to be, I don't know, a little bit of organic things happening because it's a fish tank. It's not some perfect, whoops, see, not perfect. It's not some perfect structure. It's literally going to be a fish tank area. So I'm going to blot that paint in there. I'm starting it up here. You can see it's starting to pool down here. It wants to run downhill because I have this on an incline now. So I'm going to set my palette down over here. And what I'm going to do is I have this clean brush. Whoops. I have this clean brush. It looks like it's dirty, or it looks like it has pigment in it because I mixed my green with it. I'm just going to get regular water on this clean brush. It's a little bit fatter, so I want to get some of my water. I'm going to put it down here. What's going to happen is when this water touches that water, that pigment is going to travel. So we're going to get it filled up as close to the edges as I can right through here. And I'm going to let it touch. And I'm not guiding it along. I'm just making sure those edges get through. So it's moving pretty quickly. And the more water that we have down here, see, I've picked up some of that pigment. To do a true graded wash, you want it to be just water so it can blend downward and get lighter at the bottom and have more individual darker pieces at the top where we have it up there. Or you can work backwards, it's up to you. Now, my pigment is still pretty condensed up here, but we're getting down to this area and I want this to be more solid through here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get my water on here. Move that shadow. I get my water down here. It doesn't have to be precise. I just want it to touch through there, touch through here. Inside this little cave, we're gonna do water later, so it's not gonna be a big deal. I'm just getting my regular water, fill that in over here. We don't wanna run into our fish, so I'm gonna give it some borders, try and get as close as I can. And then I'm gonna go back in with my other brush and make sure that I have plenty of this pigment that's still looking like it's darker down here. And as long as it's still wet, it'll still continue to do that graded wash. It'll still be all the same color, it'll just keep moving that way. I have quite a bit of a puddle right here, and you can tell that on your screen. So occasionally, what I do is I lift it, and I'll move that water somewhere else if it's not doing what I want it to do. You can see that it's moving over there. I'm gonna move it over to this side because I have to have my water over there in that area. Now I'm gonna make sure and pull that back over here so it's covering all the areas. Get that little rock sculpture in there. And then part of that rock sculpture is over here as well. Because this paint won't travel all the way over to here, I'm gonna go back with my pigment and I'm gonna get some right behind my little fishy dude, and it's gonna continue to travel downward because of the tilt that I have on my board. You guys can do that with your desks because they have that nice like angular tilt. And as I put this through here, it's just gonna move some of that as well. So here I started with the pigment on there, and then added the water down below. Here, the water's already in here, and I'm adding the pigment as I go. It's just two different ways to do a graded wash. That's a little bit better. Now, I don't know if I have quite enough water in here for it to move around, so I'm gonna kind of manipulate it a little bit, do a tilt, make sure that area stays wet, just kind of rehydrate that area, tilt, 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 help it out a little bit right there, and then I'm gonna let it tilt back down. And it wants to follow, kind of like a river, it all wants to go to the easiest spot because I'm getting kind of a divot in my paper. So I'm gonna pull a little bit over here and just make sure that some of that pigment is coming out to this other side as well. Now, this side did a really good job of continuing to move, but it's kind of dried up over here. And I wanna make sure that this stays that darker. And this part stays darker. So you can quit messing with it at any point. I'm a messer. I chronically never know when to quit, and I always wish that I would have quit earlier than what I do. Again, I'm gonna have this be the little rock back behind, and that too. So I'm gonna let this do its thing. If I have too much of a puddle here and I'm worried that it's gonna roll off of that spot, I can take my clean brush and my cup of water over here, rinse it out, make sure that I have everything rinsed out, and I'm gonna take my bristles and just pinch over top and pinch that water out over top of my cup so that it becomes as much of a dry brush as possible. And so I've made it all nice and thin there. So what I'm gonna do in here is I'm just gonna dip it right into that puddle, and those bristles are just going to pick up that puddle of water, and then I'm gonna squeeze it out into my cup so that it doesn't pool right there. Now, this does a lot of cool striation type things. I wish that it has a little bit more color in there, so I'm gonna add just a little bit, and we can always go back and add things over top of it as well. So this is your graded wash. Now I'm just adding little bits to make it less white on the top. And because that's still wet, it's still gonna bloom just a little bit.